Did you send
The Topeka City Council meeting will come to order. Last Sunday morning, a sister city, Orlando, Florida, witnessed a horrific situation that no city ever wants to undergo, this mass murder of 49 individuals. An extremely sad occasion for our entire country and for a city. We think in terms of and remember the victims' families and their friends, and the city of Orlando, whose psyche has been terribly wounded. So let us rise and take a moment of silence, to be followed by the invocation introduced by Councilmember Emerson and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Tonight's invocation will be presented by Pastor Kennedy from the Apostolic Church of Jesus Christ at 2420 Bellevue.
Shall we pray? Gracious and eternal Father God, we come before you this evening. Lord, we come first of all just to say thank you for your love, your grace, and your mercy. Father God, we're asking you to look upon the bereaved families in Orlando. Lord, every one of them, God, only you know what they stand in need of. And only you are able to give them the solace that they need at this time. Father God, let it remind all of us, oh God, that life is but for a moment. We're here today, Lord, and we're gone. And it's only in your divine plan, Father, that we're able to see each other, to touch each other on this day. We're asking you to strengthen all of us and help us, oh God, as we look to you, to be able to give us the strength that we need. And we're asking you, Lord, that you touch every council member, the mayor, everyone that is a part of this meeting. Lord, give them the wisdom, the guidance that's needed, Lord, to do that which is pleasing in your sight. We're asking you to help us to constantly remind each one day by day that life is but for a moment, and that it's very important what we choose to do with the moment that you have given to us. Let us learn how to love one another, embrace one another, respect one another, and most of all, Lord, allow you to order our steps and to direct our path. Father God, we're asking you to watch over the citizens of this city. Lord, help us, oh God, that we will allow the leaders that are trying to instruct us and take us to a place that you're trying to get us to be able to have the wisdom to know and the ability to be able to respect their decisions. Lord, we're asking you to lead us and guide us, and we'll be careful to give your name all the glory, the honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor Terry. We do have a presentation tonight. For that, I ask the Deputy City Manager to introduce.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to ask Susan Duffy, the General Manager of Topeka Metro, to step forward.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am so pleased to be here tonight and introduce to you the newest of our fleet. And it is the fastest of our fleet. It is our new True Blue bicycle. And so next I'd like to introduce Carl Fundenberger. He is your Director of Bicycle Operations. And I dare say if you see Carl anywhere out on the street, he is on a bike. So Carl?
Well, we were thrilled when we introduced our bike share system here as the first city in the state of Kansas last year, that within 3 months, our trips exceeded those in Kansas City. We knew that demand was great for bicycling, not only for transportation, but for recreation as well. And we hoped that we would find some help to add to our fleet. So here we've had these blue bikes out and about for about a month, and I'd like to introduce John Dykus of Capital Federal, who helped make this happen.
Carl, thank you, and now you can tell who he found. But we're very proud to be a partner with Topeka Metro and the Bike Share program on something that is healthy and happy and fun for the citizens of Topeka. Hopefully all of you have had a chance to maybe ride those. I can say our family went out on a bike ride. I won't tell you what we did on the bike ride, but we rented 4 of them and rode around a portion of Topeka on them. So it's a great deal of fun that I can attest to, but we're very proud to be a part of that, be a part of something that is fun and happy and healthy for the citizens of Topeka. So thank you allowing for us to be a partner with the Topeka Metro Bike Shares.
Well, on behalf of the city, thank you. Thank you very much for the gift of Capital Federal and for this tremendous program that we're witnessing and enjoying.
This is the sort of partnership that I think you look to us to find as a governmental entity. We were so pleased when they stepped forward and made the offer. And again, this is what it's about. It's finding those partnerships, those ways where we can intersect with one another, and the benefit is mutual. But I think the overall winners are the citizens of this city, because these bikes are paid for, and not by us, by our great partner. So I appreciate what they have done for us and the outreach that we're able now to provide a little bit further with these blue bikes, and they're so distinct on the street. And you know, so patriotic, the red and blue. So we're just glad they're out there. So thank you very much for your support and all that you do to help us be on the street as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We'll
John's going to ride one.
we'll ride down the ramp.
I got my account.
That completes the presentation, so we'll proceed with the roll call.
Mayor Wolgast.
Here.
Council members Hiller. Here. Clear. Here. Ortiz. Here. Emerson.
Here.
De La Isla. Here. Jensen.
Present.
Schwartz. Here. Cohen.
Here.
And Harmon.
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda, council members, and we will have one, I think, about 15-minute executive session. So we will proceed with the consent agenda.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Anthony Williams an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Gladys Jimenez an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions. C is approval of a workers' compensation settlement for Gregory Vogt in the amount of $14,859.90 for the permanent partial impairment of his right shoulder for injuries suffered on January 30, 2013. D is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Lorene Williams to the Topeka Human Relations Commission for a term ending June 1, 2018. E are minutes of the regular meeting of June 7, 2016. F is applications. We have a list of cereal malt beverage license renewals. Staff is requesting approval.
Okay, that is the consent agenda, and your pleasure. Deputy Mayor Yalisla moves to approve. Councilman Jensen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. If those vote no, I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the consent agenda is approved as read. We proceed to the action items. A, an ordinance from the Planning Commission.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson, amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located along the north side of Southwest 27th Street and approximately 500 feet east of Southwest Indian Hills Road from RR1 Residential Reserve District to R1 Single Family Dwelling District.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I thought I got a new title for a second, so thank you.
Equally important.
Equally important, thank you. Before I call it Mr. Fyander, we'll try to get the map pulled up so you guys can have a visual, and I'll give a brief overview of the item, and then we can see if there's any questions. What you have before you, as noted, is a rezoning. That is on the north side of 27th Street, just east of Indian Hills Road. Just for a refresher for the council, our process in the city of Topeka is that we annex property and then we rezone it. We don't have any authority to rezone property that's outside of the city limits, and so the first step was to annex that property, and that happened at this body 6 weeks ago, probably. And the reason behind that was this particular subdivision wanted utility service, as is often the case. As noted in the cover, what this does is it changes the zoning to a more restrictive use. We have to keep in mind the purpose of zoning, again, just kind of a basic education for everyone. The purpose of zoning is to make sure that properties are functioning at their highest and best use. And in this case, this gives us current and future protections and eliminates ag uses associated with the property now that's becoming a part of the city. This is consistent with our LUGMUMP, the Land Use Growth Management Plan that was adopted by this body. As you might note, it comes with a recommendation from the Planning Commission to approve. And so as always, you have options. You can accept it, you can amend it, you can defer it, you can reject it, all of those requiring different levels of votes from this body. So at this point, I'd stop and see if there's questions.
Are there
for
questions?
myself or
in the
Mr. Finder.
background? Yes. We're aware, we've heard that at a hearing or discussion on it earlier. Mr. Cohen,
I'd like to move that we proceed to vote on this.
okay, you move to accept the, or approve the ordinance
As read.
for the rezoning, and Councilman Jensen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the ordinance is approved. I'll go to item B, involve the public hearing and another ordinance.
B is a public hearing and an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson relating to the vacation of a north-south 20-foot wide public alley right-of-way lying between Northwest Topeka Boulevard and Northwest Harrison Street and Northwest Curtis Street and Northwest Railroad Street in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Mr. Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Once again, I'll give a brief overview of this item and then see if there's questions for myself or Mr. Fyander. As noted, this is a public hearing, which we'll hold after this brief discussion, and then presumably we'll have an adoption of an ordinance by the council. The ordinance will vacate an alley, as noted on the visual in front of you, and as outlined by the city clerk in the parameters between Topeka Boulevard and Harrison and Curtis Street and Railroad Street. If we do allow for the vacation of this alley, it will allow the rescue mission to expand their daycare in the future, which seems like an admirable goal. The mission does own property on both sides of this, so we typically might have to have a neighborhood meeting about this, but because they own the property on both sides, that wasn't necessary in this case. And again, just to kind of reiterate, the ordinance would vacate the alley, most importantly. It would allow for an easement for AT&T, and it wouldn't vacate the sewer, but it would turn the sewer line that runs down the alley into a private line, maintained and eventually owned by the rescue mission. That line doesn't have any material impact on our ability to serve the rest of the area, so we're very comfortable with that. So again, at this point,
Okay,
I'd stop and see if there's questions.
Are there questions or discussion? Yeah, Mayor. We will then proceed to the public hearing. This is a vacation of a alley, so state law requires we have a public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we declare the public hearing closed. Deputy Mayor DeLisa moves to approve, and in your district, we'll have you second. I will second. You'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the ordinance is approved. We go to item C, ordinance on guard license changes.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson concerning merchant private police license regulations, amending City of Topeka Code Sections 590.010, 590.110, 120, 130, 140, and 170, and repealing original sections, and repealing Section 590.050 in its entirety.
Mr. Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Before I call it Mr. Gagne to see if there's questions from the body, I would point out that in your packet tonight is a memo from Ms. Robertson, the city attorney, and also from Mr. Gagne, addressing some of the outstanding issues that were raised at the last council meeting regarding this particular process. Specifically, just to run through those very briefly, the reason that the city is involved in issuing licenses for this group of people is that our police department has access to FBI and KBI databases, which private security companies would not, and so that we have traditionally done that on their behalf. Additionally, I think one of the questions raised last time was whether or not there'd be liability for the city if someone with a license did something inappropriate. Certainly, Ms. Robertson can address that more thoroughly, but the very short answer is no, there's no liability on behalf of the city. And then finally, we did have a conversation with some security companies, and it appears that they would be supportive of a measure like this. In the past, it sounds as if they've been frustrated by the rejection of some applicants for reasons such as a 20-year-old conviction, and so they at least expressed to Mr. Gagne that they would be supportive of this. Again, as discussed from last time, this ordinance really does three major things. First off, it changes the period of, right now we have a conviction disqualifier for ordinance misdemeanors, which wouldn't allow someone to obtain a security guard license. And that period right now under current ordinance is 20 years. This proposed ordinance changes that period to 10 years, so that's one major thing it does. It changes what the definition of a conviction is, and so that definition no longer includes diversions, it no longer includes expunged convictions, and it no longer includes juvenile adjudications. And then finally, the ordinance removes references to firearms. As this body is aware, a series of state law decisions have prohibited cities from regulating firearms within their borders, and so we need to be consistent with new state law. So once again, I'd stop after that brief overview and see if there's questions for myself or Mr. Gagne.
Are there questions pertaining to the ordinance? Councilwoman Claire.
Could someone explain to me what you can get a diversion for, what you can get an expungement for?
Okay. Mr. Gagne.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a diversion is on the front end of the case, and expungement is on the back end of a case. Typically, a diversion is something that is for a first-time offender and is at the discretion of the prosecuting authority, whether it's a district attorney or a city attorney. The idea is rehabilitation. If they satisfy the terms of the diversion agreement, then the charges are dismissed and it never results in a formal adjudication of the case. An expungement is on the back end. After the conviction has been entered, they've served their sentence, they're no longer on supervision, whether that's parole or probation, and they've served a period of time of good conduct. Then the convicting court can review the conviction, and if it is satisfied that it is warranted, can erase the conviction from the record.
Okay. How long after the rehab and the diversion, you said the first-time offenders, and then if they do the rehab, is it like a year or something?
Typical diversion agreement is 1 year. They can be as short as 6 months, and they can be longer than 1 year. Sometimes on more serious cases, they can be 2 years.
And can you get a diversion for a felony?
Yes, ma'am.
And on the back end, how long is a good conduct? Same thing, whatever the judge decides, 1 year, 6 months?
For an expungement? It varies on what the crime was. It can be as short as 1 year in the case of certain kinds of prostitution cases. It can be as long as 10 years for more serious cases like second offense DUIs or vehicular homicide, things like that. And then the most serious felony crimes under Kansas law, there's no expungement for them. So it really just depends on what the crime is.
Can we break this down and say, juvenile offenders, could we say if it's I have trouble if they committed a felony, get a diversion a year later well, it won't be a year later. Is it still the 20 years? After, I'm talking about diversion. Okay, so I have trouble then if they have a felony diversion, they have rehab for a year, and then they apply to be a security guard. If we do this, they would be able to get that license, right?
I believe so, yes, that would be correct.
So could we do something like that and say not if it's a felony diversion?
I don't see why not. I think that would be possible, yeah.
And can you tell me some felonies that could be diverted? Like bank robbery, what else?
I doubt that they would divert a bank robbery.
Okay, what else?
Mainly, you're talking about low-level felonies where they would do a diversion. They would look at whether anybody was hurt. A lot of maybe property crimes, low-level drug offenders, criminal damage to property that might be a felony, or maybe a theft case that it was more than $1,000 that was just over that felony threshold.
So there are some felonies you can't get a diversion for?
High-level felonies, yes.
Like
the
murder?
Mid-high-level felonies were like aggravated battery or murder, manslaughter. Those are not typically diverted. Diversion is at the discretion of the prosecutor. In theory, they can divert anybody they want to, but in practice, they tend to look at the harm that had been done, whether anybody was injured, and the severity of the crime.
Okay, thank you.
In that, what is the role of the judge when it's between the prosecutor, prosecuting attorney, and the defense attorney on such as a diversion?
Well, the diversion agreement is filed with the court, so I don't know that I've ever seen a case where a judge objected to a diversion agreement, but I suppose they could.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm thinking about this is if in court a diversion has been agreed upon and it's entered in as that, then I question if we, sitting here as a body, want to change or overrule the decision that has been agreed to by the court. I think that's where I don't see that's quite what our role is. If this is an agreement that's been made, it's appropriate with the court, and then I think we should stand by that. And not try
Right.
to,
The diversion agreements are in the criminal court where the case is filed between the defendant in that case and the prosecuting attorney.
and then an expungement, that is where who is involved in that makes that decision.
Same parties. It's the judge, defendant, prosecutor, and it's back again in that original criminal court, but it's at the end of the case.
Yeah,
when
right.
everything's done and a period of time has passed, the defendant is just essentially saying, for good conduct, I'd like to have this taken off my record. I've stayed out of trouble. And
Right. Councilman Jensen?
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm clear. You keep using the terminology like taken off my record and expunged, and that's actually not even remotely accurate. This information it remains on their record, and it's searchable by anyone in the law enforcement community. Is that correct?
it is taking off the record for most purposes. There is a exception for law enforcement purposes, yes.
And this is the law enforcement purpose that it's running on, essentially, is where that information comes out. So even
Law
though it's
enforcement-
quote-unquote diverted, it's only diverted from everything but this.
Law enforcement would be able to see it in expunged conviction, yes.
And
It would be
this-
flagged as expunged on their printout.
I see. So when a judge tells somebody that it's expunged, Is he or she qualifying that? Are they being, I mean, part of the struggle we have is people come and they apply, and if a judge says, this is off your record, and they check the box that says, I have nothing on my record, because they were told by a judge, you have nothing on your record, now suddenly, they're just doing what they were told, even though we're not properly asking the question.
No, if we change the definition and we're not going to count expungements, then although law enforcement would still see that on a background check as an expunged case, it would not count against them as licensing. What the purpose of law enforcement being able to see expunged convictions is for is there are times when that expunged case can be used as a prior conviction to enhance a current case. And that's the main one that I could think of, is when you talk about second or third offenses. They can go back, and if there has been an expunged prior offense, that could be used then as a prior conviction.
So realistically, for the purposes of these applications, we shouldn't be looking at that as a prior offense.
We do now because our definition in our ordinance says we do.
Right, but in the past, why was that decision made that way? It doesn't sound like this is a law enforcement issue that would warrant us looking at that information. Is that not correct?
Okay, excuse me, Deputy City Manager.
I think maybe just as a point of clarification, we're talking about what exists now.
Right.
Where expungements don't exist, and what is being proposed in the ordinance.
And that's correct.
Which is expungements would count, and so
And
we
I'm
wouldn't
trying to
look at
understand the
those.
history of why we have done it the way we've done it. I'm sure there's a very good reason for that. I'd like to know exactly what that is before we opt to change it.
I don't know why the ordinance was written that way.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay, you have something, and then,
I would say it's for public safety. On the application, it says, have you ever had an expungement? These people know if they've had an expungement because they have to pay. And it's not just something they take to court, they have to pay. So they do know that. I cannot support this because of the expungement. And I'm sorry, Luther, I just think that, to me, because of the diversion, not the expungement. To me, a diversion is a one-time first offender slap on the hand. If they get in trouble within that time frame that the judge sets, then they have to go back and be tried for this one and the following. And I think that's very important when they're asking us to look at these licenses, and I think that's why it's for the public safety. It's a public safety issue. It was just stated that they can see things that we can't, or they can't come up with. And I don't have a problem with if we do something with the youth, if they've been an offender and they've been clean so many years. But I think if they have a diversion and we don't talk about that, and it's within a time frame, and then, they're a security guard at a clothing store and they have a stealing diversion. I just wouldn't feel comfortable with that. And I apologize, but that's just how I feel. I know me and you talked about it, so I respectfully agree to disagree. But if we can change something like that, I'd be happy to do that. But if we take that totally out, I think that's a safeguard, and I think if we take that out, then we won't have to use it, and then they might wonder if they go in there stealing again. Just an example.
Councilman Cohen. Go ahead. No, I recognize you.
Is this something that maybe we need to bring back again next week?
If someone wishes to defer for more discussion or background, so we could consider that. And then Council Deputy Mayor DeLeese.
I just was going to reiterate a little bit of what Councilwoman Ortiz stated. I wanted to make sure that as a body, if there is confusion with regards to the way that the application is written, that it's clarified. Our documents do state that you have to say if you've had an expulsion in the past. There is no question. And in the past, when we've had the issues that we've had, it has been because individuals who feel that their situation has been expunged are stating no, even though the question is right there and it's clear. And people are choosing, even though they see it there, to not fill it out correctly, and that is why we've had to revoke applications.
That brings a whole other level of concern than if they're lying on applications.
And that is exactly,
Let's just have one person
thank you,
who
Mayor.
has the floor.
That's exactly the reason why we've had the problems in the past and why there's been several applications that have been denied. But I want to make sure that there is clarity that as part of our protocol, we do ask specifically, has there been an expungement? There is no confusion about that with our process.
Councilwoman Claire.
So what are we saying when we grant the license? Are we saying you're approved to have a license to go apply to be a security guard, and they run their own background check and approve that person? Or are we saying we approve that person to be a security guard with this license?
No, I believe all it's saying is that they are able to work in the city of Topeka as a security guard, and they can go and...
So does the security companies do their own background?
I think it would depend on the individual security company, but they would probably rely on ours because we're the ones running them through the criminal history database. So there really is not much point for them to redo it.
And very basic, what's a security guard? What's the purpose? Do all of them carry weapons?
Some do, some don't. It depends on the individual company and what the assignment is, on whether they want them armed or not.
So they are securing something as a security guard?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is there a committee that would oversee this? Perhaps it would be advantageous to have them take a look at this a little bit deeper before we bring it up for a vote here.
I think it would be policy and finance. Would you agree would be the committee that would be assigned to public health and safety? Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Obviously, either one of those committees would be appropriate, and that's at the discretion of this body. We brought forward what we thought we heard from the previous discussion. We thought we were helping to address an issue that we've seen at this body. And so I think we're comfortable with the language here, but if there's some minor tweaks we can make, maybe, and not necessarily skip the committee process, but if you have some specific direction that we could get it back to you more quickly, we'd be glad to do that. We'd also be glad to defer to the committee process.
All right. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there a certain deadline by which we need to amend the gun part of this?
Well, the gun part of this is still in the ordinance, but it's not been enforced. Back when those laws were changed by the state, we stopped requiring that as part of the licensing procedure. What the piece that's left is just removing the wording from our ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a series of comments and questions, and maybe I'll run through them quickly so colleagues have an idea of what I've got, and they can see whether they agree. I think it might drive whether people want to put it in committee or give it a week or two to get some more answers. I personally, at first blush anyway, I'm okay with backing it off to the 10 years, as well as dropping the expungements. I'm hearing the concern about the diversions. I'm still inclined to do that, but I have a problem about the youth one not being counted simply because there do need to be consequences for a juvenile conviction, and to be able to be immediately go get a security guard license when you've done something wrong. Maybe we would knock it back in half, like to 5 years, rather than the full 10, maybe 5 on the diversion instead of the full 10. But I a little heartburn about those two. Again, the questions I had were, we actually license only 2 others, cable installers or security system salespeople and security systems installers. Is that correct? The other 2 that we check and license?
I know we license those 2, but I'm not sure if that's the only 2. I didn't look at that. Apologize.
Thank you, that's okay. When I asked last week for the list of licenses, and I keyed off Councilman Emerson's question, I thought that we were going to get from the city clerk the list of all the other licenses that we had, so that we could then also look and see whether they were 10 or 20 years and how they address these other qualifications so that we could have a simple look at being consistent. And if there are only 2 others, that would be pretty short work, perhaps, but I still think it would be helpful to all of us to have that.
Do you know that this came out today, that we received a list
Yes,
from
but
the
it
Topeka
doesn't
City?
have the licenses on it for, like this one. It doesn't have that security system installation and sales on it. And I checked with Brenda, and thank you so much for getting that out, and she said, oh, they don't do that, the police department does it. So I guess we asked for it from the wrong source. And it just came out about 4 o'clock this afternoon as well. So I think that additional information, so we have an idea if we roll it back to 10 years, whether it's consistent with the other investigations we're doing or not. I also had some concern as I read back through it, and the detailed language, there are a lot of strikeouts in there. And so there are on page, let's see, all the way up on the first page, we've got, we have in there a list of what things you would not get a license for, but there is let me see. Okay, starting on page 7, the suspensions, if somebody's convicted of felony, convicted of any of the, is this just suspensions or denials? Okay, they could be denied if the person's under 18, if they've been convicted of a felony, or convicted of any of the following crimes within 10 years. And it says a crime involving dishonesty or fraud, a charge involving use of firearm, crime of violence, including any crime involving physical force, and any violation of a law regulating any controlled substance. And I guess that was intended to sort of consolidate some of these many things that are knocked out. But once you get to the next page, the strikeouts include all sorts of detailed listings of convictions regarding domestic violence. And I don't know, for instance, if stalking is considered physical, which is the only one that would be that would knock somebody out here. Not all domestic violence is physical, and so I'm not sure that this new language would include domestic violence. When you get to page 10, there is an item that talks about mental capacity to do the work. And I'm not sure, I would have some questions about exactly what that means and why it's now exempted as well. And then there was on page 10 also kind of a catch-all about other things that the police department felt were of concern. That also is stricken. I just feel like I need to know a lot more about what those mean, and therefore with this new list of just A, B, C, D, what's covered and what's not. And further, if the security companies are relying on us to have checked out the criminal history that's important to them, it sounds like you had a few conversations and that they were comfortable with it being knocked back to 10 years. And I don't know, I would want to have some assurance that they too understood what we were changing these qualifications for. So those are the concerns that I have. Thank you.
Councilwoman Schwartz.
I think we've heard a lot of discussion here, and this does need to go to committee to be determined. And as I'm reading through this ordinance, it talks a lot about the police department and the chief of police and everything. I'd like to hear maybe in the committee, whatever committee it goes to, what the opinion of Chief Brown and the police department is on making this change. So I make a motion to move it, to defer it to committee.
All right. And probably public health and safety, I think
so.
would be appropriate.
It's safety.
Okay. The motion has been made to refer this item to the Public Health and Safety Committee. Is there a second? Councilwoman Miller seconds. Any discussion on the motion to defer to the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the ordinance is referred to committee. We go to item D, dangerous dog ordinance.
D is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson concerning dangerous dogs, amending City of Topeka Code Section 605080 and repealing original section.
Mr. Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Similar to the last agenda item, this is an issue that's come in front of staff, and I think they've been proactive in trying to work to address this and working to correct what they see are some deficiencies in our existing ordinance. In your packet, I think there's some good information, which will be helpful as you go about trying to make a decision. There's the ordinance. There's the memo from our Chief of Prosecution and our City Attorney addressing this issue. There's a chart comparing the changes from what exists right now in ordinance form to what is being proposed. And then there's a memo from the former city attorney back when this issue was super thoroughly vetted in appears to be about September of 2010. Some of you may remember that process when the new animal code was adopted during that time frame. There's been a question already about whether this needs to go to committee because of some of the outstanding questions. Again, I'll reiterate, that's obviously a council decision, but I'd say from a staff perspective, we're comfortable with what's being presented and feel like it addresses what we need to. Before I call Mr. Kidd up for questions, just very briefly, I think kind of walking through what's changed between the existing ordinance and the proposed ordinance. First of all, there's no changes to what is defined as a dangerous dog. You can see in that chart that that definition remains the same. There are some changes. In fact, they're increased the penalties on what happens if there's a human or other animal attack. Those amounts are changed. There's no changes to the dangerous dog at large portion of the ordinance. And then really the meat of the ordinance, what this was designed to address was if there's an attack on a human, it mandates certain circumstances where the dog would need to be destroyed, but it also allows for judicial discretion in cases where there's not great bodily harm and there's not a previous instance. That allows for the dog may or may not, depending on how the judge views that. So again, with that very brief overview, I'd stand for questions or see if Mr. Kidd can answer any.
Questions on this pertaining to the dangerous dog ordinance, changes that we had a discussion topic on last week and now before us as an ordinance? Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Mayor. What is the current requirement or the current process for licensing pets in Topeka? So do we require that all dogs be licensed, that all cats be licensed?
Yes, currently in Chapter 6.05, it does require that pets kept within the city limits be licensed or permitted, and that permit process is done through the Topeka Police Department.
Okay. So they would reach out to their non-emergency line to get the proper license?
I'm sorry. Yes, they reach out to TPD. I believe they can start the process online. I'm not positive of that, but they fill out an application, submit a fee along with proof of vaccinations, and then if approved, the city of Topeka sends out a one-year permit that's then renewed every year, and then reminders are sent out every year when the permit's about to expire.
And about how much do those cost, do you know?
I believe it's $30, but I didn't confirm that before I came in, so.
It's $8.
Oh, I'm sorry, the fee is $30 if you're convicted of it. I apologize, I was getting my numbers mixed up there.
Okay. I do have one additional comment.
Sure.
After our conversation last week, I had a constituent call me that lives in the Westport neighborhood, and they said that they're wanting to know if maybe some of this could be changed to include dangerous pets. And the reason being is they have a bully cat in their neighborhood. charges out from the bushes and attacks people walking by. Small dogs, big dogs, I mean, it doesn't care. It just, we also laughed on the phone about this too with her. So, I mean, is that something that we can also consider?
I don't see an issue with considering something like that. I don't think it's necessary to fix the concern that I have. I mean, that could be something that we do in the future, but I don't think that we would have to include that in the changes that I've made. And again, just to reiterate, what brought this to my attention was a dog that causes great bodily harm or death is not required to be destroyed if it's a first offense. Vice versa, if a dog is convicted of being a dangerous dog on 2 occasions, that dog is required to be put down, even if it never actually bit somebody or caused an injury. And so, because our definition is broad enough, which I included that memo from September of 2010, because I think the intent clearly was we wanted a broad definition of a dangerous dog. What I don't think was intended by the title of that memo, this is to protect the public and save animals. And under the current ordinance, I see those 2 gaps that this ordinance isn't covering. Those are the results I'm seeing in municipal court, and that's why I've proposed these changes. So I'm not saying that we couldn't include a dangerous animal or a dangerous cat or something to that effect, but I don't think that the ordinance as proposed, the changes, should be placed on hold while we figure that out.
Councilman Clare?
Okay, so if Susie's playing with a puppy from next door and the puppy bites her, the way it is now, the puppy would have to be destroyed?
It depends. If the puppy has never been declared a dangerous animal, there's no discretion for the court to destroy that animal.
Okay, so
however, if that puppy bit another child, just playing around 2 weeks earlier, and a dangerous dog finding was made, and then it bites another child, whether there's injury or not, that dog has to be put down under our current ordinance.
Right, this ordinance. See, what I need is like an example of Susie's dog, so I can really figure out. I think I know what you're talking about, but on the other one then, if Susie's dog is really, really dangerous, but doesn't do great bodily harm, what's going to happen to Susie's dog?
Under the current ordinance or under the
Both.
proposed changes? Under the current ordinance, it's only a dangerous dog if it's been declared a dangerous dog by the court, and that means there's been at least one instance.
So nothing's...
So nothing is, the dog's required to be kept in a 6-sided enclosure, the spayed or neutered, the dog's required to be microchipped, that sort of thing. But the owner's allowed to take that pet home. If the dog then has a second case, regardless of injury, at that point, the dog is required to be destroyed under the current ordinance, regardless of injury. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, because the serious attacks that cause great bodily harm or injury, we don't see those that frequently. They do occur. We've had probably 3 or 4 since I've been here since October. The other instance we see quite frequently, a fairly minor attack or a minor injury where the dog's being declared dangerous or being ordered to be put down if it's a second offense. We see that quite frequently. So the proposed change is really to address both of those concerns. And that's based on when this ordinance went into effect to protect the community and to save animals. And I don't see that the ordinance as written is really doing that in those 2 situations.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. If I could add a little bit to the answer and the conversation, the answer is it's complicated a little bit more. And something I mentioned last week, and I've talked with Chuck a little bit about it, on lines 119, 120, and 121 of the ordinance as proposed, the staff is proposing that we remove the lines that say it shall be an affirmative defense to all that other stuff if the dog was provoked, teased, injured, was protecting itself, its owner, its offspring, a mama with babies, or another human being. And I lived with this through what we did in 2010 and have been engaged in these discussions frequently since then. And I appreciate that staff's brought this forward because I think it does need to be reviewed again. But they only see the ones that get to court. And they don't all get there. One of the things in reviewing it and trying to understand, and I've shared this with Chuck this week, we had one this week in my district. Dog loose, walking down the street. People had seen the dog before, hadn't seen it do anything, walked right up in the front yard. Owner was there, little dog on the porch, attacked the dog, almost killed it. Everybody's watching. They chase the dog back, find out where the dog lives. This ordinance says that animal control may take the dog. So we've got a dog that just has been through over $1,200 worth of surgery, and it looks like he's going to be okay. The other dog, the dog wasn't even impounded. The attacking dog wasn't impounded. The dog, and so there's a discretion there. A year ago, when we did got the dog licensing online that Councilman Cohen talked about, I was forwarded an email. I asked just how staff thought the ordinance was going as it was, and Officer Pinkley, who's currently the acting head of the division, sent an email back through the department that said that she felt that the ordinance, including addressing both human attacks and animal attacks, was working well, and I can share the whole thing, but she felt like it gave the ACOs the latitude they needed to make good judgments. It had appropriate expedited hearings, and that it was working well. And so I checked to see if they checked all the way down the line with the ACOs. I'm not sure that happened. I'm eager to hear straight from the ACOs and the people out in the community. Because it's complicated. I've been involved in ones where it was a child, but the child had gone onto the dog's property, and the child thought they were playing, but they surprised a sleeping dog and it bit them. And that's different than if that dog was out looking for trouble someplace else. It's different in our ordinance today, and I want to make sure we don't, that, if we need to make some changes, that we do it. Because one of the things I talked to Chuck about these exemptions, it's redundant with the definition of dangerous dog, and Chuck has pointed that out to me. However, if we take ours out and leave the language that's in there right now as it is, that language, and it's in the memo that we got today, that language regarding a dangerous dog that attacks a human doesn't include the exception regarding a dog on its own property. For some reason, these aren't consistent amongst each other, and I think we can do the work and get them consistent. And it's different, and there's something else left out when it talks about attacking a dog. I think we can get them consistent, but I don't think we can do it right here in this meeting. So I would like to really have that input as well as the consistency in the language that's there, and test them, as Councilwoman Clear said, with real cases and see what would happen.
Are you suggesting that this be referred to a committee?
I would move to put it into Public Health and Safety Committee.
All right. It's been moved to defer this, or rather refer this item to a Public Health and Safety Committee. Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Clear seconds. We have persons assigned to speak on this issue tonight, so at that point, thank you. We'll have, the first to speak is Shay Foley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilmen, men and women. I appreciate you taking the time to hear me. When you review this ordinance, please send it on to somebody that's going to put some teeth in this law. I was a paramedic firefighter for over 25 years in the Metro Kansas City area. I've seen dog bites both by police animals and by people who are unresponsible about their animals. And I want us to protect our children because they are our future. Please put some teeth in this law. My great-granddaughter has been attacked right here in Topeka by a dog. The police department did everything within the letter of the law. They did their job perfectly. Animal control, perfect, to the letter of the law. Where the ball got dropped was in court. The judge had no teeth to do something about this animal. This animal attacked another human being. I can understand, like the councilwoman said, about protecting its owner. I can understand that. A good dog will protect its owner and protect its property. And that's only right. There should be that language in there. But please, utmostly, protect our children. They are our future. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, governing body. I have a number of concerns about this issue. First thing, I'm going to put Betty Phillips' testimony into the record. All of you got it. I hope you'll read it, especially the third paragraph where she talks about her experience with being bitten by dogs in High Crest, her experience with her child being bitten a number of years ago, other people she's observed having to fend off attacks from pit bulls that are running amok on her very own block. And in case you think that's isolated, I was called to inspect a house, 3132 Humboldt, earlier this year, simply to see if I or somebody would be interested in buying it. It was in horrible shape. The owner lives in Florida and is not taking care of it. What else is new? So I walk up to the house and barking at me out of the window next door was two pit bulls. And of course, since many of these houses don't have screens on them, you go, my gosh, you know, I mean, the dog wants to just come right through the window. And of course, when you've got two of them, well, that is going to lead to pack behavior. I don't know if any of you have ever watched wild dogs go into pack behavior, but you ought to watch that. Because these large dogs, I hate to tell you, but they're not that far removed from wolves. They can go into pack behavior. We had an example of it that was mentioned by the prosecutor last week at Chesney Park that was earlier this year. Two pit bulls attacked kids in a park, and I guess they wounded adults as well. Two people had to go get treatment. And I guess, according to the testimony, the police had to use their firearms to kill one of the dogs because they would not be restrained. And I don't know. I raised large shepherds at one time, and I would not keep a shepherd the size of what I had in the city. I have more sense than that now, thank God. I've had kids. I would not have kids around such a large animal. If I had kids, you know, in my house, I would not have that kind of an animal on my property. The liability issues are enormous. And I've heard of people that like to go rescue dogs. They want to go rescue these dogs. They're afraid they're going to be put down. You know, they're concerned about these large animals that may not be able to get a home. And I'm going, do you know what you're bringing into your house? You have no idea the history of this animal. You don't know how that dog's going to treat even your own kids, if you've got kids, or the neighbor's kids. If neighbors are unfortunate enough to have you as a neighbor, and you treat and you bring those kind of animals into the neighborhood, and it just shocks the conscience that some people put animals far above children. A child cannot defend themselves from a large animal, period. They just can't do it. Frail elderly people trying to get their mail, like Betty Phillips, can't defend themselves from a pit bull. Now, she can defend herself well with the pen, but dogs don't usually read letters to the editor. They don't read emails. They don't read addresses. Did you notice that? You know, a lot of kids don't read addresses. They don't know that that's not their yard. They're going after their ball. They're going after something that is theirs. They're going to a park that belongs to everybody. And yet they're attacked viciously by pack animals who happen to be pit bulls, could be a shepherd, could be a Rottweiler. None of these animals are kids going to be able to defend themselves from. So I'd like to take one more minute, if I might.
It's been moved to extend his time for one more minute. Councilman Emerson, Councilman Jensen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
You have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, please continue.
I have one more copy of Betty's email, if you pass it around, if anybody wants to look at it and didn't get it. I've watched these kind of animals in Topeka be ignored, and you can blame the owners, that's fine. But I think if a dog bites and breaks the skin, which draws blood, I think they should be put down. I just have no tolerance for an animal that especially would bite a child. And what about our code enforcement people? Do they have the right to be protected from these kind of animals? What about the meter readers of all the utilities? They have to go on these properties. And what about just the person that was asked to go inspect a house and just see if it's fit to be rehabilitated, and they don't even realize that there's 2 pit bulls waiting to pounce them from next door? I think a lot of people do not realize what they have when they bring these animals home. And I am very concerned about the lack of care that's given to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Melina Ronca.
I have pictures. I'm not sure when to hand them. I'm losing my voice, so I might be kind of hard to hear.
So just go there, go right in front of the mic.
Is that better?
That's better. That's
Okay.
good. Thank you.
My name's Melina Rocha, and my daughter's name is Ariana Williams. She is 6 years old, and she goes to Holy Family Catholic School. I appreciate you guys letting me talk tonight. I'm going to start with our story. If you could close your eyes and picture it is a very beautiful and warm day outside, between 76 and 78 degrees. You just got home from work and your daughter really wants to play outside, but you need to get dishes done, start laundry, and start dinner. You decide to let your daughter play because you have a huge window in your kitchen that you can watch her from. She asks if she can play with the kids across the street. You hesitate, but you decide yes, only because you can see their yard out of that window as well. So you go and get dirty laundry from the bathroom because you want to get it started and going while you do dishes and make dinner. Next thing you know, your daughter is walking down your hallway crying and screaming. You run to her and see her clothes are ripped. She is missing a shoe and covered in blood. This is every mother and father's nightmare to see your child tore up and covered in blood. When I saw her, I wanted to hold her and hug her, but I could not do that because her side under her right armpit had been punctured, her leg was covered in blood, and when she turned around, her back was a bloody mess. She also had flesh hanging out of her right leg. She told me the neighbor's dog had attacked her. I went immediately over to their house, and they wanted to call the cops, but I took her to the ER where I knew the cops would be called and my daughter would get medical treatment at the same time. This dog had broke its chain, ran across yards to get to her. The owners got to keep this dog and only got fined a little over $200. My daughter on the other side got and still has post-traumatic anxiety around dogs. Her therapist believes she is growing a phobia of all dogs. She is terrified of any dogs, no matter size or if it's in real life or even on TV. She had to miss almost a month of school due to not being able to move. Ariana has scars all over her body that she is very embarrassed about. But one thing that scares her every day is that she has to come home every day and see the animal that viciously attacked her and could have took her life. Why would anyone want an animal like this around? Why does this dog have to attack another child or adult before it gets put down? How is this fair to any human being that's just walking down our street or playing? And if the dog gets loose again, what could happen? That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Melina? Yes. We all share your pain. We thank you for bringing the pictures. We all share your pain, and we're doing the best that we can so there's no loopholes in there.
Thank you.
So I hope that you would come to our committee meeting when it's held, but just know we are concerned about your child and yourself, and thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, we have a motion before us to refer the ordinance to the Public Health and Safety Committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 8 yes, Mr. Emerson voting no.
We have 8 having voted yes. The ordinance is referred to the committee. And I do want to acknowledge the fine work of Luther Gonagray and Chuck Kidd on these 2 items. They're difficult ones. I know you're responding to views that you hear, that you've learned, and also from the council. And we appreciate the good work that you do, and we will be continuing working on these in committee. That completes our action items for this evening. We now go to the non-action items. The first, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion of a resolution requesting the Kansas Department of Transportation to install a home of Harry W. Palmieri signs on the interstate highway around city limits.
Mr. Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. With your permission, I'd like to ask Mr. Fyander to come forward and give a presentation on this issue. It's an exciting proposal that he's going to present to you tonight, and rather than go through it and steal his thunder, I'll let him get it in front of you.
Mr.
Fyander. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Gerber, Mayor, council members. Let me start with a little bit of background and walk you through what is before you, or will be before you here in the coming week. KDOT has what they call a Home of Sign program. This recognizes the birthplace or the home of a living or historic person along their highway approaches into a city. And they allow they allow 1 person per city. They have the name of the person only and 1 sign per approach. So basically 1 sign per, or one person per city is the key here. Topeka has a Home of Sign. From our research, KDOT has indicated that we have 1 sign along I-70 out west at the city limits. This is one of 9 approaches that highways make into the city. This sign recognizes astronaut Ron Evans, which in his own right is an extremely significant part of the community's history. Highland Park grad, KU grad. He was actually the last man to orbit the moon on Apollo 17 in 1972, which is extremely significant in our history. And he did pass away in 1990 in Arizona. The sign that was put up was actually put up at kind of in the heyday of the Apollo space program to kind of promote their mission. And many communities received these. We were one of them. And so, but it wasn't necessarily one that we as a city requested. So, in the course of the next, there we go. So in the course of the next or last few months, we received a proposal from the American Legion of Kansas, as well as Downtown Topeka Foundation, that supports requesting of KDOT Home of Signs for Harry Palmieri. And many of you know, that he was author of the GI Bill, 1944. Probably, arguably, the most significant piece of legislation in U.S. history. It provided benefits in housing and education and medical to returning veterans of war in World War II, and basically created the middle class as we know it today. So it's really touched and impacted this country unlike any other piece of legislation. You've seen his name as part of the Colmery O'Neill VA Hospital. He's recognized there. And he was a Topeka resident from 1919 to 1979 when he passed away. Lived in Potwin, and I believe he's rests at Mount Hope. In a couple weeks, actually probably in a week, there will be a dedication for a downtown park in his name, in his honor, that the American Legion of Kansas has also raised a significant amount of funds for. So it's one of our new pocket parks that will be coming up. Very exciting. To commemorate that, to align with that, so this request came forward. We had this before the Transient Guest Tax Committee a few weeks ago at a couple occasions for discussion. Very, very good discussion, very good input. And we learned three things. We learned that Harry Colmery is definitely a worthwhile person that we should be, as a community in Topeka, letting other people know about him. So that was the first thing. Second thing is Ron Evans. There's still a good deal of sentiment out there and pride for Ron Evans, particularly in the Highland Park community. And then thirdly, I think it came out as this is a bit of an unfair choice that cities get to make, particularly cities that already have a sign, particularly those that have an astronaut, which we are so grateful to have and to publicize, yet these were put up without the city's request. And so Topeka wouldn't be able to make a request under the current policy. So we think what we would recommend as a body, and by the way, the KDOT requires the request to come from City Council or governing body. So that is why this is before you or will be before you. So a resolution has been drafted to ask a couple things. First, we'd recommend asking KDOT for a variance to that policy based on what I just mentioned, so that we can keep the Ron Evans sign that is out there, but also add the Harry Colmery signs as home of signs at the other approaches to the city. We would also ask that it be descriptive, author of the GI Bill, and so that, again, it aligns with some of the tourism goals and visitor goals for the city. And then lastly, the requesters of this have also put on the table an offer to fundraise for Ron Evans' commemoration downtown as a notable Topekan. He is on the list, like many other Topekans, historic Topekans. Just needs a little bit of fundraising to get something placed downtown, maybe possibly near the park that is being dedicated. So that is on the table as well, and I can let Pat Michaelis with the American Legion of Kansas actually talk about that as well tonight. But with that, I would, so next week we have a resolution that would come before you stating these asks of KDOT, and would look for your consideration.
A question on I'm not sure I understand the variance. So the Ron Evans sign cannot be taken down. Is that what that's why we have to have a variance?
Yeah, correct. Mr. Mayor, the KDOT policy just allows one city, one person per city.
I understand.
So that's,
but we can't change who that person is if we chose to do so.
You could. You could. If yes, you could ask that Harry Colmery signs replace the Ron Evans sign.
Okay, so I mean, if KDOT says no to our variance,
that's the next step you would have to go down. Mm-hmm.
All right. And are you including in this resolution that we must fundraise for Ron Evans to be, I mean, that's confusing to me. That sounds like we're asking KDOT, or I don't know, we're asking KDOT, and then we're asking KDOT for a variance, and we're to fundraise for Ron Evans. I don't know that that's the role of the city council.
Correct. No, we're not asking it for any, we just mentioned that as a point of, we do not want to lose sight of Ron Evans' contribution. So that is another thing that the requester has offered to do. It's not the city council, it's not KDOT, it's not staff, it is from the applicant.
All right, but the resolution will just state asking for the variance.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Schwartz.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had this twice in the TGT committee and heard testimony on it. And one thing that we did find or heard, that there's a variance in Salina, that they have 2 home of signs. So we should be able to ask for a variance that we can have 2 home of signs too. So that's the variance. And I think that we heard from a lot of, a lot of discussion that we would like to have both Ron Evans and Harry Connery.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it's a great idea to ask them to keep the existing sign. For one thing, that'll save them a couple of bucks, which would lead into my question, who's going to pay for these other 8 signs? Is that something we would have to pay for then? Do we get put on the waiting list until they have money again? What's the timeline?
No, Councilmember Jensen, we would not pay anything. This is a KDOT funded program. We would leave it up to the discretion of how many of the signs. I put that we could have up to 8. That would be what you ask for, what most you can get. So,
thank you.
Councilman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree with Councilwoman Schwartz. I don't know if this is the proper time to agree that maybe we would like a variance for both signs. I'd hate for us to replace Ron Evans with another sign, but I also am proud of, Comery too. But when does that come in play? Are we just looking to do that? I mean, because and I had looked that up too. Salina has 2, so.
yeah, Councilmember Ortiz, we are asking to keep the Ron Evans sign and add the Harry Comery signs at other approaches to the city.
Is that what the resolution was?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because I guess I was a little bit confused too, but.
Yes.
Okay, well, I could agree with that then. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the work you did, Mr. Finder, on this. That would be a great compromise and honor to great Topekans.
Correct.
Thanks for all your work on this.
And we have one person to speak on this discussion item, Pat Michaelis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Pat Michaelis, and I'm chairman of the Comery Park Committee and Plaza, and I don't know about you all, I just am aghast. As a city, we haven't celebrated this gentleman before. It's just, this is one of the greatest pieces of legislation ever passed by any nation. And, you think, who did it impact? It impacted all of us. It rose all but. I think, I have pages of stuff I could tell you, but I think Bill did a fabulous job. I just want to make one thing clear on, I have offered to raise the funds to put a sign up for Captain Evans in downtown in the event that they do not allow us a variance to have both of them. So I'm not saying I'd do both of them, but if somehow that doesn't come to pass, I'd be glad to find the funding to put a plaque up. And honestly, I would do that and want the plaque to be near the Comery Plaza. Because if you think about the GI Bill, and then you jump to 1962, and Kennedy said, we're going to the moon, he was talking to the engineers and the scientists that were educated by the GI Bill, so it all kind of fits together. So it seems to me like we're all on the same page here, so I don't need to ramble on. I'd be glad to answer any questions you've got. It's been, we have raised the money for the park, and it was easier than you can believe to do. So the funds are raised. We had over 400 donors. So it's all private money. So,
And I think you did have involvement of the American Legion.
Absolutely. And I should have mentioned that the co-sponsors, the co-organizations are the Kansas Department of the American Legion, that's the Kansas, and then the Downtown Topeka Foundation. And the reason the American Legion, because Mr. Coleman was the state and national commander of the American Legion, not necessarily when he wrote the bill, but, you know, he came out of World War I and realized the deplorable conditions of our soldiers, and then he started engaging the American Legion, and, you know, they were, in essence, the sponsor, or one of the sponsoring organizations. So, yes. And the dedication is 2 o'clock next Wednesday, and it's going to be cool and overcast that day.
So next Wednesday is
Next Wednesday at 2 o'clock.
dedication of the...
We got a 100 by 40-foot tent, so there will be some shade down there, so
Okay.
I hope you all can come.
All right. Are there other questions, comments? Councilman Hiller.
Well, a comment is that I just, kudos. I think that this is long overdue recognition, and also, frankly, I think the fact that there are so many donors is testimony to how important he was, as well as an opportunity for so many people to have a piece of what we're doing downtown.
Yeah.
And so I want to give you kudos on both of those.
You know, when people are buying, you're supposed to shut up and stop selling. But I want to tell you one other thing. I mean, I do think this is a business decision. It's a marketing decision. I mean, so to have signs that would, and we have a place down there they can come enjoy this, so it becomes another good thing for people to visit when they're in town.
Okay. They'll learn about Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. No other comments on the discussion item. We will then go to item B.
B is discussion regarding proposed amendments to municipal court costs and fees.
Mr. Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. One of the interesting pieces of legislation that came out of this last legislative session that impacted cities, there were a lot of them, as we all know, but one of the pieces of legislation that got passed was House Bill 2696, which essentially raises, that mandates that municipal courts collect for the state an additional $2.50 on certain misdemeanor or moving violation cases that are filed in municipal court. Judge Jason Geyer is going to come forward and present on this. He's going to talk about the impact it might have to the city, the impact it might have if we have to absorb those fees, and also talk about what some neighboring cities are doing in this regard. So with that, I'll turn it over to Judge Geyer.
Judge Geyer.
Thank you, Mayor, governing body. As Deputy City Manager Gerber said, on July 1st, House Bill 2696 becomes law, and that mandates an increase of $2.50 per filed case on misdemeanors and moving violations. It does not include non-moving violations. Those are essentially the three types of cases that we see in municipal court. These fees, these mandated fees, this additional $2.50, will go to the State Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training Fund. Now, the proposal that we've put before you tonight is to increase the city fees and court costs for the misdemeanors and moving violations by $3. That would encompass the $2.50 that goes back to the state, and would put an additional 50 cents per case into the city general fund. Additionally, for non-moving violations, we're asking for a $3 increase in fees and court costs, and that would go all to the general fund. Now, you may be asking why are we requesting this? To be very blunt and very basic, it boils down to customer service, and I can show you what I've observed in the 4 months that I've been here. First, the fines would be in whole numbers, and I understand that to the layperson that may not sound like a big deal, but I can assure you that it is. We deal with hundreds, if not thousands of cases every day. We're a very high volume court, and that 50 cents, when our court clerks and others have to deal with this 50 cents, this hanging 50 cents, it takes up additional court time of the clerks, it takes up judges' times, it causes some problems that may not be apparent at first blush. And I can tell you that in my experience, and I believe when there was an additional increase back in December, I believe, and Judge Miller appeared in front of you, I believe he said the same thing, and I'm in agreement, that it creates an efficiency. Working in whole numbers creates an efficiency. To be very blunt, we try and have good customer service here, try and have a nice environment here. Most people don't want to be here. And if they are here, they want to be here for the shortest amount of time possible. And having that whole number would allow that. Secondly, it would create what we would call a two-tier system, which is what we have now. All misdemeanors would have one court cost. All traffic violations, whether they're moving violations or non-moving violations, would have another court cost. It simplifies things. It, again, helps with customer service. I don't want to speak for the Chief of Prosecution or Chief Brown, but I believe they're in agreement. It makes things simpler. When officers write citations and they write the court cost down, they know immediately this is a traffic violation. They don't have to differentiate between moving violations and non-moving violations. And I guarantee you, and I can give you some examples, they're not as easily distinguishable as you might think at first blush. So ultimately, the request for the increases, other than those that have been mandated by the state, would be for customer service purposes to the constituents. I want to give you a few numbers, and I want to stress that these are approximations and estimate. These aren't firm, hard figures. We had approximately 18,500 cases that were filed in 2015, and of those, 75% were misdemeanors or moving violations. Those are the violations that require the $2.50 increase. Now, if we were to do nothing, we're required to pay that $2.50 on 75% of these cases. That would take approximately $35,000 out of the general fund, based on last year's numbers. On the flip side, if we increased as I have proposed, which is the $2.50 plus the additional 50 cents for the misdemeanors and moving violations, and the $3 for non-moving violations, that would add approximately $18,500 to $20,000 to the general fund. I wanted to make sure if we asked for these increases that they weren't going to be grossly out of proportion with other municipalities or offensive to anybody. And I can tell you that it's really right in line. The numbers you're looking at now on the screen, all these numbers don't take into account the mandated $2.50. And what you're looking at only goes for moving violations and non-moving violations. But for comparison, Manhattan, Kansas right now charges $89.50 in court costs for moving violations and non-moving violations. Olathe, 74. Topeka comes in at 73. Emporia, 70. And then we have Lawrence at $60.50 and Lenexa at $35. I've put asterisks by those. I've checked into those, and I can tell you that while their court costs and fees are considerably lower than Topeka and these other communities, their fines tend to be much higher. So at the end of the day, I'd say everybody's comparable. The final tally, when folks are convicted or fined, the amount of money they pay is approximately the same. Additionally, of the cities I contacted, none of them, I either didn't get a response or the ones I did speak to, none of them anticipated absorbing these costs on their own. But they were going to build them into their court costs in order to pay the state. And likewise, when I said it was easier to have what I called the two-tier system, everybody has the two-tiered system. Nobody has the three-tiered. Some only have one, I'll tell you that. So if we were only to increase the moving violations and the misdemeanors by $250 and not do anything else, we'd have a three-tier system of court costs. And granted, there's many municipalities out there, and I haven't investigated and surveyed everyone, but the ones I've looked at, we would be the outlier. We would be the only city that I looked at that would have this three-tiered system of court costs. So that is the reasoning behind asking for these increases, in addition to what's been mandated by the state.
What is the typical moving violation level of fine? I know they vary, of course. But is it $50, $100?
No, in the city of Topeka, I would say it varies between $70 and $100.
Okay. So in that case, then the total fine plus costs would be, say, like $180.
Yes. If we went with the increase, I'm trying to think of an example. For example, speeding 10 miles an hour over is a moving violation. I guess that's maybe a poor example. We have a $45 set fine for anything between 1 and 10 miles an hour, but it would be the $45 for the fine. And then if we went with the increase, I believe it would be $76 added to that.
When someone pays their fine, is this broken out? I think, as I don't have experience. Is it broken out? In other words, how much is court costs, the fine, and of those court costs, how much is the city and the state?
Yes, when I rule from the bench, I explain which portion is fine, which is the punitive punishment portion, and also explain to them what the court costs are. I believe Judge Swartz does as well. I'm sorry from memory, they get a printout, they get a journal entry which tells what they owe. I believe it might all be contained into one figure off the top of my head, but certainly the breakdown is in the ordinance. We can provide them with that breakdown if they ask, and it's my intention to actually put the breakdown at some point on our website in order to be more open.
Because, as you know, many times it's the city, I hear from people about all the court costs, they assume it's all the city's court costs, and it's much more the state.
Right.
Deriving income to fund programs through court costs, is what we're doing from the state's perspective.
And, Mr. Mayor, I will tell you this, I'm interested to hear that you say that, because honestly, I haven't heard, in the 4 months I've been here, I haven't heard anybody complain about court costs. If they're more interested in getting their business done and
leaving.
Okay, and so that's where I guess my customer service experience, I think, takes precedence over the either 50-cent or $3 increase. And again, if it was egregious, I wouldn't be standing in front of you asking for this. Yeah. But again, we're kind of middle of the road. We're right there in the middle, so I don't see anything terribly offensive about it.
Okay, well, maybe it's people I associate with that express these views to me. But Councilman Clear.
I don't have experience, but my husband does, and he just had an experience. And it was Lawrence. And from what you said and from what I figured, I know what his ticket is, it comes out to be about the same. But when I looked at it, I said, holy cow, what do they do with $60 in court costs? So do you have a break? Can you get us to break down what goes where? Is that what you're talking about getting on?
Sure. Yeah, and I'm going to put that online. It's actually in the ordinance, and I only have one copy, but it breaks down specifically, $1 to the Judicial Education Fund. The Law Enforcement Training Fund gets $1. It goes right down the list.
That would be good to know.
And of course, if you want to search through the ordinances, you can find that. It's my plan, sooner rather than later, to put that right on the municipal courts page.
So it's just more transparency, like we're not trying to hide what
Right.
Great.
Good point. Councilman Ortiz.
But, Mr. Mayor, they can get an expungement and just pay the court costs and pay their attorney. It's not on their record. Am I right? And there you go.
Well,
there you go.
Actually, Councilwoman, they are responsible for the fines before they can get an expungement.
But they can work on it.
But they can work on it.
I've had a few of those.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I know handling even numbers is easier, but I have a huge problem using court costs to fund the general fund in any amount whatsoever. There's a number of other communities across the country that have gotten in big trouble politically because And granted, they use a lot more, fines and tickets and so forth to fund their city, but I just don't think we want to even start down this road at all. I'm okay with raising the court cost to support the state because we're required to, but I don't think we want that 50 cents going to the general fund. I think that sets a bad precedent. It's bad news bears. Thank you.
Deputy City Manager.
Councilman, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We currently have in the general fund budget about $3 million of revenue from the municipal court that funds overall general fund operations. So I would respectfully suggest we're down that path a ways and have been consistently. I might also ask Judge Geyer to talk about just a little bit anecdotally that if he has to leave the bench, like someone comes in 50 cents short and he has to take care of that fine, what that does in terms of efficiency and operations for the court.
Good point.
Generally speaking, what would happen, and this happens, it doesn't happen quite as much, and Councilman Jensen, my fear is it's going to happen a lot more. A lot of folks paying cash. If their outstanding balance is $73.50, I've witnessed it myself, they bring in $73 and they pay it. And the clerks don't have the authority to waive 50 cents. If it's a mandated court cost, quite honestly, I don't have the authority to waive the 50 cents. It's got to be collected. They've got to leave and get the 50 cents and come back. Or they don't come back at all. We've got this open 50-cent balance on the books. If it's to the point where they have paid the court costs, but there's some outstanding fines, so hypothetically it's something I do have the discretion to waive. The clerks don't. If I'm on the bench, somebody's got to wait for either myself or Judge Swartz to leave the bench to waive that 50 cents. Or a court clerk brings them up to the bench while we're conducting another proceeding, which makes somebody else wait. We're a very high volume court. I know it may seem minuscule, but I urge all of you to come and view a day's work. It's a high volume, high stress environment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. I would like us to see us move away from that $3 million. I think getting revenue from fines is just not a good idea. So $73.50, $74, it shouldn't matter. If I don't have enough money to pay, I don't have enough money to pay. Maybe I only bring in $72 and the fine is $73, you still have $2 sitting there. I don't see that as a reasonable excuse. I mean, I understand that it's tiny amounts of change that are there that are required by state, but that's part of the job. So I'd like to see us to work around that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Not to put you on the spot, Judge, but how much money do we have out that people owe us? So we're not making big bucks.
No.
We've got millions out that is over, that we are paying what I would call a second party, a collection agency to get our money, and we're in the millions that we're out.
Yes,
So when,
that's correct.
so when we try to collect, then we're collecting from the honest people, the good guys, because those are the ones that's going to pay it so they don't have those warrants. I mean, everything you do has a fee. Whether you pay your lights, your gas, everything, and it's put back in there. So I would support this because we're not making any money off of it. We're losing money, and we're losing tons of money. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Neil Isla.
Thank you, Mayor Wolgast. I will absolutely support this, and here's why. I think that we should not lose sight of the fact that we are a customer service delivery mechanism, and that we incur in cost in order for us to have our staff here and to do the work that we do. And the number one location where those funds come from is the general fund. Now, I'm not saying by any means that we are to go ahead and start using fines in order for us to make ourselves rich. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is we have a mandated, an unfunded mandate that we have to pass on to the state right now that we must cover. We are at a loss right now because we're upside down, because most of the individuals that come to our courts are not able to pay. And in that process, the request that we're being presented with is not something that is saying, well, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and add $1.50, and I'm going to bring in $1.50, an additional dollar per, $4.50, and bring in additional funds in order for us to make some money. This is really nothing but experience of our very experienced staff saying it's a hardship for the individuals that are coming here. People come in with the cash, it's really difficult to go ahead and get up and make change. So at the same time, I just don't want us to forget that we are still a business and we do have to cover the cost of the court that is serving our constituency. So I will be absolutely supportive of this.
Jensen.
Thank you. There are millions of businesses that manage change every day. I guess I just don't understand why we cannot do it like the other millions of businesses out there. And I do understand that this is an unfunded mandate, and I support that aspect. What I don't support is I don't want to have to pay somebody else's court fines because they didn't pay. And I realize that to some degree that's the nature of the business, but asking everybody else to fund the few people that choose not to, I just don't see how that's fair. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I support it too. We've had discussions before. I think all of us have some heartburn about raising fees at all, yet those things do change with the times. I hope it's understood. We're in budget right now, so if people want to look, each one of our budget pages identifies the source of the revenue that particular department brings in. In case it sounded wrong, all that revenue goes into the general fund and then goes back to support the various departments. I think something that I haven't checked in the last couple of years, but not everybody uses that court. So to have those fines and fees make a substantial contribution to the expenses of that court from a business point of view, I support. And so we can look at that again, but I appreciate the challenge and the presentation. Thank you.
Is there other discussion or questions? Councilwoman Schwartz.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Your Honor. Of course, I support the courts. And I think this is not, you can look at our parking fees, anything that's a user fee that we have. It takes time for our police department to go out and make these arrests or these tickets, give these tickets. I don't have a problem with it going into the general fund. So thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Judge, for the presentation.
Thank you all.
We will have this also in ordinance even next week. Go to item C, discussion.
C is discussion regarding the history and overview of the Riverfront Park project.
Mr. Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. As indicated, the intent of this discussion item is to be a history and overview of the Riverfront Park project. They oftentimes say to begin with the end in mind. You'll hear from two presenters here in just a second. The ultimate goal of this discussion will be to have an action item next week where the council approves a property purchase associated with this project. I'm sure Mr. Downs will talk about this more thoroughly, but a project that has really been outstanding since 2002, when the council adopted a resolution of support for this project and specifically donated or dedicated funds for it through our TGT, a 1% tax, through the transient guest tax. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Pat Downs to come forward and give a more thorough overview of the history of this.
Mr. Downs.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Gerber, and Honorable Mayor, members of council, city staff. For the record, my name is Pat Downs. I serve as the Director of Development for the Topeka Shawnee County Riverfront Authority. I want to acknowledge that our chair is actually here this evening, Beth Fager, in the audience, and certainly if there are any questions that I can't answer, very possibly she could. Mr. Gerber and Mr. Colson asked that we provide a brief summary of the actions in the past in the context, or to provide context so that when you do have some action items for consideration and next Tuesday, you'll have a background for exactly what we're suggesting and more to the point, why. This is a very early rendering of the park that was designed by an architect that was hired by the city back in around 2006. it's an image that many of you have seen in the past, but it's to give a little bit of context on why we're doing what we're doing. This Riverfront Park site has actually matured and improved over the years. Since about 1999, when this park was first proposed as part of a North Topeka redevelopment plan that was approved by this body. Several things have happened, both in terms of the Noto Arts District and its emergence, the Children's Palace for the Topeka Rescue Mission operation. A number of things have come forward, and certainly more recently, the Corps of Engineers agreeing to upgrade the levee system along the river, which then opens the door for a lot of other projects to be seriously considered along the riverfront, where before taking care of that primary flood issue, it would have been somewhat irresponsible to do. So in addition to all of the other physical improvements, we have some new stakeholders that have been brought to the table. The Riverfront Authority has invited, with the help of the City of Topeka and Shawnee County Parks, the National Park Service to come forward to help with a design charrette that will ultimately help to define this particular park parcel. And with an eye toward both historic and heritage tourism, both of which represent a rather significant segment of the tourism industry in the United States, and it's a very fast-growing segment of that industry. Again, I mentioned back in '99 is when this project was first proposed. It was an element of an overall redevelopment strategy for North Topeka. Obviously, that has moved forward with a lot of really great things in the Noto Arts District and the surrounding area. In 2002, though, as Mr. Gerber suggested, there was a resolution and later an ordinance creating that 1% transient guest tax, and a portion was then dedicated to this particular Riverfront Park project with a $1.325 million cap. So with that in mind, in 2006, the City of Topeka Parks and Recreation engaged an architect firm, which then created that conceptual plan that you saw just a moment ago. In that same year, several other things happened. One is that the Curtis Flyoff then opened the area that we're talking about to direct access and without interference from the train traffic, which can be somewhat of a problem. At the same time, discussions about consolidation of the park function of both city and county under the county began in about that time. So many things happened. And then the creation of the Topeka Shawnee County Riverfront Authority occurred by a state legislative act in 2006. So a number of things occurred in that period of time. In 2008, county and city parks operations were consolidated under the primacy of the county, leaving this riverfront plan and this particular plan kind of in between, because the property, the funding, the project itself was a work in progress, so it never was fully changed over to the county's engagement. In 2008, we also learned that the Corps of Engineers wanted to do some fairly major work on the levee system. That obviously involved a number of studies that took some time. The study itself came out in '09. In 2011, the county and city park functions actually did merge. 2013, I became involved as a regular development consultant to the Riverfront Authority, and the Riverfront Authority then worked in conjunction with your congressional delegation and the leadership here in this body to promote the WRDA bill, which then funded the $30 million worth of projects along the Kansas River that the Corps of Engineers is undertaking as we speak. So all of that then has taken place, again, since this project was first proposed and approved back in '99, and then later on funded in 2002. So with the sunset of the 2002 transient guest tax program, there's a finite budget, and I'll let Sasha Hahn here get into the numbers here in a moment, but there are funds that were set aside for this park purpose, and there are things that need to be done in order to move the ball forward. One is there are some parcels of property that have yet to be acquired by any government entity, and the city is in a position to effectuate those acquisitions with funds that have already been budgeted for that purpose. And at the same time, we're suggesting that then some of the land be cleared and put in a position that then a park could be ultimately developed on the site, but creating a green space, if you will, in that area, which would be beneficial in terms of open space, public space for that venue. And then at the same time, the Riverfront Authority worked with a task group that engaged Heartland Visioning, the Great Overland Station leadership, the Chamber of Commerce, you can pretty well name entity in town, and they are engaged in this park planning engagement. And it has moved forward to the point where, again, coming up here in in August of this year, we will have the National Park Service in town to create a design charrette that will be a national design charrette conducted here in Topeka for this riverfront park, because they have found that the Oregon Trail crossing at Papan's Landing is of significant national interest. And so it gives us a great opportunity, we believe, to leverage that interest in tourism in addition to providing green space and so forth here in town. So from the south bank, or from the north bank looking south, that's what it looks like when your river has water in it, which is a rather compelling view. And right now there's plenty of water in your river, by the way. And so the next steps that will be recommended and I think discussed at the next Tuesday's meeting are, right now we're talking about just acquiring the property. There's a few out parcels that need to be bought. The funding is available, so we're recommending moving forward on that. And then in terms of the eventual disposition of the development of the park, that's something that's open to discussion here and ultimately the determination by this body. If there are any questions, be happy to address them. Otherwise, Ms. Hahn and Mr. Fyander were here and can provide additional information.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are there any other Oregon Trail type parks that are being built across the United States at all? And if so, do we have any idea what the tourism is like there? I'm looking for something comparable to what we're proposing to build here.
There are, and I'm not directly familiar with them. I know that they are. We did a survey and found a number of similar facilities. This is a little different than probably the average because of its location in an urban environment. A lot of times, in fact, we spent the better part of the day, Councilwoman Hiller and Chairperson Fager and others went out and actually looked at the Alcove Spring Park area, which is an Oregon Trail marker that the National Park Service helped with some years back. But that's out in a very remote area. You have to go down some dirt roads to get there, in fact. But I think the fact that we have this park in an urban setting next to a major activity venue like the Great Overland Station, next to an emerging urban arts district in the Noto Arts District, I think you have a different dynamic here which should drive quite a bit of interest.
So this would put us in a fairly unique position to maximize these assets in combination with each other.
I think you said it exactly the way I would. That was
Excellent.
well said, Councilman.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions for Mr. Downs? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been talking about purchasing these properties for a while, right? Is this the same ones or is this different property?
Same properties. This plan has been around for a while, and I think we have moved the ball forward. The Riverfront Authority took a bit of leadership and pulled some of the key parties together with the City of Topeka, Shawnee County, Heartland Visioning, and others, the Noto Arts District, all the stakeholders at the table to make sure that this was still a viable plan, and it appears very much that it is. In fact, in many respects, we are in a better position, I think, to leverage these particular assets in a positive way for the community than we may have been a decade ago. So sometimes when you don't move very fast, good things happen, and this may be, in fact, one of those cases.
I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same properties, because I've been on for almost 11 years, and I'm thinking, I thought we already purchased those, but I guess not if they're asking.
Some were purchased, some were not. Mr. Gerber, do you have details that I don't?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, I believe Ms. Hahn will address that in her
Okay,
presentation,
so-
but we do have 3 properties outstanding.
So perhaps we should go, if there's no other questions,
Seems like a
Mr.
good
Downs.
time,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Councilman Emerson.
Mr. Downs, I've obviously followed this throughout the years, just, from the outside. And I know a lot of people have done a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. And I recognize a lot of names from the community that have done a lot for our town, so I really appreciate that. One problem I really have with this, though, and I'm for any construction, usually. The problem I see, though, when you show these slides, it shows this beautiful panorama looking down the river, but in reality, we're like 25 or 30 feet, down from a levee, where all we're going to see is the levee, and maybe you have some sketches or something I can see how this works. I can't, in my mind's eye, I guess, envision how this would work. Now, my family's been up to Omaha, and it's beautiful what they've done. They have a nice pedestrian bridge across the river there. But the difference is Omaha's built on a bluff kind of above the river, and it works fantastic. And I'm having a real trouble getting, my head around how you erase the levee, I guess, out of the.
Well, you don't erase the levee, and of course, we're not here to present detailed plans and specifications for this park. That would come at some future time with future funding. All we're talking about is acquiring property at this point to make sure that park is protected. But in terms of the levee issue, there are several ways of addressing it. One is to gently slope up from ground level up to the top of the levee, so that you have a gradual incline up to that levee level where you can then see across the river. You can see what's going on there. The Riverfront Authority is working with the Corps, the city, and others to hopefully develop downstream weir, which will then create that river lake effect that you saw in the photograph that I showed you on a permanent basis, not just when it's spring rains and the river is full. So I think you're talking about some urban design issues having to do with that levee, and it is, in fact, some obstacle to progress. But there are design techniques that can work around that, and I'm confident that with the right minds brought to bear, we can have a good solution.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just
City Manager.
Just to follow up on what Mr. Downs is saying, we're in discussions on a routine basis talking about this issue, that there is projected to be a berm there, but it's a berm that could conceivably have things, whatever those things are, on top of it. So I think that can be incorporated into whatever design moves forward.
Other questions of Mr. Downs? We will go on to the next part of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, governing body members, good evening. Just 1 second. Okay. So included in your memo, you saw that the city manager asked me last year in 2015, to work on the acquisition of the last 3 remaining parcels. And to go back and answer your question, Councilmember Ortiz, on what would be the left hand of the left side of the map as you're looking down on it, you'll see there's the Kelshar development parcel that's still, it's hatched, and that is one of the outstanding properties. But there are 4 properties there that say Shawnee County. Those were properties that were acquired previously by the city and were transferred as part of that park consolidation. Now, just to what would be the right of that, with the buildings, that's 225 Northwest Curtis Street. That is still owned by the city of Topeka, and the best institutional memory that we have of that property is that we didn't hold title to the property at the time of the consolidation, and that's why it wasn't transferred. The county does inhabit that facility, and that's where a portion of their parks maintenance operation is out of. But for this evening's discussion, we're going to talk specifically, real briefly, about that Kelshar parcel, clear over to the left, and then right at the corner of Curtis and Harrison Street, you'll see there's a privately owned, it's a residential property, and it says Richard Williams. That's the owner-occupied, or the owner of the property that lives there. And then further down to what would be the right, at the corner of Curtis and Jackson, you'll see 601 Northwest Jackson Street, and that one in particular is the acquisition item for your consideration next week. But to go back, just back up just a little bit. So last year, city manager asked me to undertake negotiations for those 3 outstanding parcels so that we could try to button up that property acquisition. I acquired appraisals of the 3 properties. The Kelshar property appraised at $23,000. The residential property owned by Mr. Williams appraised at $37,000, and the warehouse property at Jackson and Curtis appraised at $87,000. My initial proposals to all 3 property owners were our appraised values. And guidance from some much more experienced real estate folks in the organization told me that that was where to start. So the negotiations with the Kelshars, or the property owned by Kelshar Development, ended when their final and best offer was $97,000. Our appraisal's $23,000, and we couldn't in good conscience bring that to the governing body for consideration. That parcel may be impacted by the levy project, so we'll see what comes of that particular piece of property. I'm still in negotiations on the residential property, but the 601 Northwest Jackson property, we feel like we've reached a pretty good deal with the owner, and that it will be presented to you guys formally next week, but it's included in the memo that you received. Our negotiated deal is $100,000 purchase price with a lease back provision for the current owner through the end of 2017 for $1. They use that space as storage space for a retail business that they have on North Kansas Avenue, and their concern is the ability to locate another storage facility or build in a timely fashion. So the lease agreement was discussed with the city manager, Mr. Fyander, who's been involved for quite some time in this discussion, as well as Mr. Downs, and that time of 1.5 years for them to remain in the facility and find another location to use as their storage didn't feel like it would really impact the timeline of the project greatly. So they felt that that was a fair deal, and it absolutely played into our agreed upon purchase price. So that is the long and short of the real estate acquisition. If you guys want to talk about the budget piece of it, I can give you the limited knowledge that I have, but I know that there are folks in the room that have much greater knowledge than I do. In the memo that I provided for you, you'll see that a total of $1,276,571 was collected in those transient guest funds for the project. Of this total, we've expended $586,082 to date, and that does include Yes, that does include $106,000 being transferred to Shawnee County at some point in 2012. The remaining expense balance was used for the land acquisition, some clearing of land, and you guys probably recall your the clearing of trees on the north side of the river that happened last year, or late 2014. The total available balance between funds that the city has and then that 106 that was transferred to the county, because that would still be dedicated project funds, is $796,489. That's what's left in your project fund. You see below that on the memo, the estimates that were originally generated for the property acquisition, the Flowers Building, which is the warehouse at 601 Northwest Jackson that we'll be discussing next week. The estimate of acquisition on that one was $200,000, so I feel pretty good about our $100,000 deal. The Williams House, the estimate was $50,000. I believe that we are still in a good range there. I think we'll get it between $40,000 and $50,000. The Kelshar development, they've listed at $100,000, and we know why. So that's your ballpark total for those 3 outstanding properties is $350. I believe that we'll get the warehouse and the residential property for around $150. Appraisal services, $2,500. That was in the original budget. Actually, I spent closer to $4,500 on the appraisals that we had done last year. We contracted with Keller Craig and Associates, and that is our legal department's preference when we have appraisal work done based on considerations if we ever had to go to court. So we did pay a little bit more for those appraisals, but they're very quality appraisals. You'll see just below that graph in the memo, property acquisition was estimated at $352,500, and these are rough estimates that were generated in the planning department. We don't have any preliminary engineering work done. I mean, these are ballpark estimates. So I want to stress to you that that total estimated cost of $851,915, that's an estimate. We are not suggesting to the city council that we think it would be a good idea to spend more than the funds that you have available left in that project fund. This is the data that had been compiled up to this point, and so I wanted you guys to have all of the information that had been compiled by staff up to the point. So that is the end of my portion of the presentation, but I would be delighted to answer any questions that you may have.
So, and the long-range plan is then to purchase these, to raise the properties, and to clear them out. Is that correct? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Indeed, as we've discussed, next week we'll have one of these very specific parcels in front of you and hope to have the rest of them addressed in the near future.
Okay. And one question on that map, the green line, what does that designate?
So if you look at that, down at the bottom, there's a legend. That green line indicates what the anticipated park area was initially. And then the hatched lines are the private parcels remaining, and the yellow lines indicate the parcel lines in general. One other, I guess, point of consideration just while we're discussing this, and this is discussion item. So a portion of this project includes, if you look right next to the Williams residential property, the Railroad Heritage, Inc., which is Great Overland Station's kind of group there, they have that piece of property, and the buildings that you can kind of see through that hatching they use for storage, the buildings that are adjacent to Curtis Street. Staff's had real preliminary conversations about whether or not this warehouse could be a potential storage area for them, and the kind of the rationale behind that is that the buildings that they currently are using for storage is kind of in the middle of all of that future park planned area, whereas the Flowers warehouse is a little bit off to the side. It is in front of the Great Overland Station development, and again, those are just preliminary thoughts that staff's had. So if you hear that in the future, you've heard it before at least.
Okay, other questions, discussion? Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sasha, so the county has the part that's next to the Kelshar properties.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we bought the Kelshar properties, we still have, I mean, it's not connected to the Overland Station properties. I mean, we have Shawnee County Parks has that. So I guess my question is, have we thought about looking at not purchasing Kelchar and making our properties with Overland Station go straight down Harrison to the river?
That hasn't been a formal staff discussion, although I've thought a lot about not purchasing the Kelchar parcel. But absolutely, I think at this point you guys are at a place where you could make decisions like that about what does the footprint of that development look like. I mean, we're not so far in that I think you would be causing, dramatic changes to a plan that, because it's not fleshed out that far yet. So I think that's absolutely
As a
something that you could
follow-up,
discuss.
I would encourage us to look further at that, because I think there's a few of us on the council that have had some trouble with, this whole connection with the merger of the Parks and Rec and what's going on with that. So, I think we need to look at, at that area. And I noticed that your recommendations, next steps for the governing body, 1 and 2 include the city could keep the property and use the TGT funds to complete the property acquisition. 2, the city could use the TGT funding to complete the property acquisition, raise the existing structures. And then 3, we could deed the property currently owned by City of Topeka to Shawnee County. And I think that one we'd have to really talk a lot about before we did that. So,
Absolutely. And sorry, I should let you finish.
okay. No, I just think we need a lot more discussion about the entire, park up for the Overland Station. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, following up a little bit further on Councilwoman Schwartz's comments, that those parcels may be, as we discussed, those may be impacted by the levee project also. And so that problem may somewhat solve itself, but certainly it's something we're aware of and looking at.
And this is about, phase 3 or 4 of the levees as it comes down the river, so in a couple of years?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we actually hope to have, we're in various stages of design on the levee. We hope to have this 90% design done here in the very near future so that we can figure that out more closely.
Know what they're going to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would just encourage everyone on the council to attend the design charrettes. I mean, that is where all of this stuff will really get fleshed out in terms of brainstorming what you can do, how it will tie into the levee project. When we did the design charrettes for downtown years ago, it was just phenomenal, the input that the community had to those, and it was a really exciting experience. So I can't wait to be a part of designing this and just seeing how it all lays out. It may fit in a box, it may fit in a rectangle, but we won't really ever know until we sit down and start putting a marker on a whiteboard and laying it out.
Okay, other discussion? Councilman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. This used to be pretty straightforward, and the city was going to own all of it, and the design was done, and there'd been a lot of input in it, and then it got complicated, so we weren't quite done, and there were a few more parcels to buy, and then it was going to move forward, and everybody knew as it progressed that originally that 1.2 million everybody thought would be enough to buy the land, clear it, get it, develop the amphitheater, develop at least the fundamentals of the park space. As time has passed, the details of how that Oregon Trail Park was to look, the water feature and the wagon trains emerged, I think, in Pat's timeline around 2006, between 2006 and I think weren't finished till about 2009. Those pieces are there. It then got complicated by this combination of Parks and Rec and the fact that we transferred some of it and then stopped and didn't transfer all of it. And I don't even know exactly how it all got balled up. At this point then as a city, we theoretically just got ourselves out of the parks business. And so it is important for us to take those 1, 2, 3 steps. I think that the new council members, new meaning in the last 4 years maybe, need a full briefing with the pictures of what the concept of this park was going to be as that money was raised and as it was established. Then if we're going to go from there, my understanding is that the charrettes, and please correct me, Pat or Sasha, if I'm wrong, that the charrettes for the Oregon Trail were more of that Oregon Trail theme and how that would fit, how we could really develop further the Oregon Trail nature of that. So we do have some, clarification of what our vision is and then how we might move forward, all at the same time as we decide to go ahead and get this one piece.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, only just to clarify, and you're exactly right, the National Park Service is in town primarily to look at the national interest, which is the historic engagement there where the Oregon Trail and the Papan's Landing and Papan's Crossing all converge there right in front of the Great Overland Station. But all of this information in terms of the footprint of the park, the ownership, all of those details will be provided, if they haven't already been, to the National Park Service staff, so that when they come in that last week of August, it's the 22nd of May through the 26th, if I'm not mistaken, of August, they will be in a full public session conducting these design elements, and so I think you'll see as that process moves forward, they're going to be looking at the broader picture. They may not look at how that interfaces so much with the Noto Arts District. That's probably something we're going to have to do on a local basis, but they are going to be quite familiar with the importance of all of those ancillary developments, because we're going to give it to them to provide context for their design work.
And I would just comment on the transfer of the property, as I was involved with the deeds. We transferred all the park property to the county, but much of this was not park property. And that's why it was city property, and it continues to be city property. It was never park property. And the county has assumed, because it's in where they wanted it, that they should have it. And so that's been some of the misunderstandings that have gone on in this period. Councilman Clare.
Well, my question would be, would this not be economic development, under the guise of economic development, and not a park?
Yeah.
So I think we need to really think about that, too.
That's no good. That's John.
If I could just bounce off of that comment right there. So we provided you with some options to consider, because we always want to give you all of your options, and I'm sure there are others that you all may think of that we didn't come up with ourselves. But I do believe that staff's recommendation to the body would be to stick with the original plan, to create a place that's a destination that folks want to come and see. And that was the intent of the original funding and the project as it was envisioned, and that would be our recommendation to the body.
Is there other discussion or comments? Deputy Mayor DeLisa.
Just a short comment. I just want to thank all the work that's been done in all these years. It's been exciting to see how Topeka has been dreaming for a long time. When I started getting involved with the downtown process, it was a dreaming process that had already a charrette, that had already a plan, that had already ideas. And it was volunteers in the community, like the ones that we have here today, that really had a passion for our city that got this going. And today we have the effects that we have. We also had dreamers like Ms. Wolgast that had the dream of Noto with Mr. Hunter and other volunteers in our community that dreamt of having a Noto's Arts District, and it's happening. So what I will ask the body is, Pat Downs is absolutely phenomenal. He is available. I have had ample opportunities to speak with him. Please reach out, learn about the project, learn about what we're trying to accomplish, and this all fits into all the things that we're trying to do to make our community better. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. We do have a public comment on this. Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Governing body, in looking at this today, I tried to find a fiscal note, and I understood the explanation of it, so I don't have any problem with it now. But if you want to leave out a very expensive property that's very small, I certainly don't have a problem with that. I looked at some of these historic documents dating back to 2002, and I was amazed at how long this project's taken. I remember coming down here several years ago and questioning why the city property hadn't been transferred to the county since it was quote-unquote a park. And just to correct the record, it was not in 2006 that we started talking about Parks and Rec consolidation. It was in 2005. That's the first time we had a vote on that. I know because I was lobbying for it. And then we had it in 2009. It failed yet again. Then Mr. Woolgass switched his vote in 2011, and it did pass. But it seems like if you have a concept of a park, then it's a park, and so it should be under Parks and Recreation. And there shouldn't be any question about who's in charge. If you're going to develop something, develop it. If it's going to be a park, then it's a park. Now, some of these entities that are on the Oregon Trail I've been to, the Alco Springs, take an SUV. It's very remote. You go way out west to Scotts Bluff, they do get a lot of tourism from the fact that that was a Oregon Trail crossing through the Bluffs area. I don't mind that as a concept. I think it's kind of interesting. Unfortunately, a lot of people, even in Topeka, don't know their history, and I mean, zero. And so I think you probably better work on the public before you spend a whole lot more money on it. We don't even have our own museum for this county. Did you know that? I've been to every county seat in this state, and to my knowledge, Shawnee County is the only one that does not have its own separate entity museum. Therefore, that may explain why so few people know the history of this community. We have a state museum. It's not a city or county museum. I'm interested in this discussion about a dam because I don't know how much that would cost, and I keep hearing about it. And I heard about a bladder dam one time, and I heard about a low water weir, and you know, I think what I would like to see, if you're going to do this and actually move forward on it, one of the people I questioned about this several years ago was Mr. Hunter with Heartland Visioning. He told me, well, we have 5 people that meet and we discuss the priorities for the community. I said, that's not enough. I said, where's the East Topeka representation? Where's the overall part of the community being represented in such a discussion? And I'm not going to embarrass anybody by naming the 5 people, but one of them used to be the president of the chamber. He's no longer there. But I question, when you have that narrow focus, how you're going to get really good ideas from the community that is supposed to support the very thing you're trying to build. I also am concerned about how long this project's taken. I don't like projects that take a long time. I think we can do a lot better if we come together and make some decisions and get things done. I'm looking at these documents signed by Harry Butch Felker, who's deceased, and they go back to 2002. I guess, in my opinion, I'd like to see things move a little faster if you're going to do them, or don't do them. And don't leave the public in between for a decade, making up your mind what you're going to do. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your comments. That completes the public discussion and the discussion on the Riverfront Park. We proceed then to the next item, which are the announcements. And first, we have the preliminary agenda for next week's meeting. City Clerk would read.
June 21st agenda includes 6 board appointments. On the consent agenda, we have a public hearing for Presbyterian Manors. That's concerning the use of tax-exempt revenue bonds issued by the city of Wichita. We will have 4 public hearings and ordinances regarding special assessments, 1 on Lawrence Bay Pond improvement projects, and then we have 3 for Konza Education and Science Park projects. We'll have an ordinance addressing council vacancies, an expenditure ordinance, an ordinance amending court costs. We'll have real property acquisition for property located at 601 Northwest Jackson, and a resolution requesting home of Harry W. Colmary signs. Discussions include use of excess 2004 to 2016 countywide sales tax funds, and a discussion on Elmhurst Neighborhood Conservation District.
Okay, thank you. For announcements, then, we go Deputy City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. couple of kudos for staff that we have. We all know we have an outstanding staff, so just recognize a couple of them tonight. First off, we have 3 people presenting at a national conference right now on the Tweet-along concept that was developed here. Allie Van Dyke, Sylvia Davis from WPC, and Amber Reynolds from the TSG group are presenting this week and representing Topeka very well, I'm sure. So that's an exciting kudo for us and for them. And then more locally, we have Latoya Martinez, who is a management analyst for utilities, and Sergeant Jerry Smith from the Topeka Police Department, who were selected to participate in the Emerging Leaders program that's done through the KU. Something associated with the University of Kansas. I'm not sure what the program's called exactly, but that's designed to recognize those folks who aren't necessarily at a senior level yet, but are showing promise and progress and in further need of leadership development skills. I'm partial to that program because I'm also a presenter at it on occasion, on a yearly basis. So I think it's a good program, and it's exciting to have those folks involved in that. A couple more announcements in case you missed it. Topeka was selected as a What Works Cities city. That's very exciting news. We are one of 12 across the country. We've done a lot of press on that, and look forward to great things coming from that program, and certainly there'll be more developments from that as the program proceeds. If you have some free time this Thursday, 10 o'clock at the zoo, that will be the opening of the Butterfly Pavilion. I'm sure I don't see Brendan here, but that's another exciting announcement for us. Well, it's right there. But so if you have time, please feel free to stop by there, and I'm sure he'd be glad to walk you through the Butterfly Pavilion and what that means. 2 more things. Landscaping has started on Kansas Avenue. That's exciting also. So a lot of exciting announcements tonight. That should be done by the end of the month, and certainly in time for the Kansas concert on July 2nd. And then finally, I think we've had such a good time tonight that we'll try to get together again tomorrow and talk about budget. That'll be at 6 o'clock. I'm stealing you, I'm sorry. I'll stop right there.
All right. That's it. Well, I want to follow up on that, on the That Works grant, in a sense, that we received. That's started by Bloomberg Philanthropy, which is from Mayor Bloomberg, and it's just been within the last 15 years. And it is truly the cutting edge for cities, municipalities. It's the most forward-thinking approach of how to make governments function better. And to get one of those grants is truly an honor. And I would say it's because we are already doing such good work in getting information out. We're a leader in that, recognized for it, but it shows that at the national level, they're aware of it. So it is truly an honor. And again, kudos to the staff, to everyone that was involved in it. And I just also, we had earlier the Culmary Pocket Park, and also security benefit is going to be the ribbon cutting on their pocket park, I think, on about June 29th. A lot of this, all activity coming together before the July the 2nd event. And then to Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow at 4:30, there's a project meeting on the overlay project. And that overlay project is Massachusetts Avenue, Maryland and Pennsylvania streets in beautiful District 4. And it's 21st to 29th, so it's like 24 blocks of mill and overlay. And then with the other streets, it's about 30 blocks. So it's a great project for the whole city, but for my district in particular. At 4:30 tomorrow at St. Matthews, there at between 27th and 28th and Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. So be there if you want to know anything about that project. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Dale Isla.
Thank you, Mayor Wolgass. First, I would like to extend my sympathies and my condolences to all the families of those affected in Orlando. This hit really close home. I don't know if a lot of people know that I was raised in the island of Puerto Rico, and 50% of the individuals that were deceased were from the island. And it is tragic to see that there's such senseless violence occurring in our nation. And it's horrible that as we look at the news, it just seems to be happening more often. So to all those families, all of our love from Topeka, know that you're in our prayers, and We just have to stick together. In addition to that, I'll switch gears. I'll go to the other somber item that I had for discussion, and it's that somebody was talking about how the situation at the River Park is economic development. And I was having a conversation this week with the Go Topeka group, and we were talking about how economic development is a holistic process. And in that holistic process, in order for us to have thriving economic development and people who want to live in the city of Topeka and are able to go ahead and provide funds in order for us to have good property taxes that are coming into our city so that we could provide excellent service, we need to have excellent schools. And when we are in a situation in which our state is discussing our funding equation, even though it has nothing to do with the city, it does impact our city. It impacts our city because if our schools are not top-notch, which 501 is doing an excellent job with policy, but if there's no funds, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen is that people are going to move away to different places, to different states. We're going to lose talent from great teachers. They're not going to be able to sustain their families. We need to find a solution to the situation that we have. And in order for us to have a thriving city, we need to have thriving schools. So I would just encourage my friends across the street to really sit down and think hard and try to find a solution. Try to find a solution. I am sure that something can be done. Now, on happy news, I am happy to report, speaking of funding, that for the weekend that Heartland Park had their NHRA tours, we had 94 and 93% occupancy in the hotels. Typically, the city of Topeka runs on a 56% or 56% rate of occupancy, and the rate for the rooms that are typically going down are $78. City of Topeka that weekend was renting the rooms at $114 average. $500,000 in 2 days. Now, mind you, there were other sports that were high school related, but that is awesome. The park looks amazing. Several of us had the opportunity to be over there. There's activities that are happening. Chris just let me know that they're opening up a motocross track, and they're doing different activities every weekend. So this next weekend, on June 17th, on Friday, I'll be there, and there's going to be drag racing, and street cars are going to be able to come and do things so that they could legally, if you're interested in driving fast, you could do so legally by going to Heartland Park. So just keep supporting that. And then following up on the thunder that Deputy City Manager stole from me, we love each other so much on the council that we are going to embark on meeting again tomorrow, but this time not at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. So I would invite all of you that are interested in our budget to join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the Law Enforcement Center, same room. So same bat channel, different time. And the other final news that I have is it was really cool to receive a good news from one of our local real estate agents. He said that today he received an email of somebody that he was showing buildings to, and there's like a 3,000 square foot building that they're looking for, and the place that they wanted to go to was, guess where? Downtown Topeka. And when these individuals were offered a chance to go anywhere else, and they said, would you like to go to the west side, to the north, anywhere else that you would like to go, they said, if you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have said, take me to the west side, but we want to be downtown. Keep on dreaming, Topeka. You're doing great.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. I would like to echo the comments to our friends in Orlando. That's a tragedy we just can't imagine. On a happier note, I have talked to lots and lots of interns from different programs, working in different organizations, through different companies, and I have yet to find one that is not excited to be in Topeka. And not just for the job and the learning experience they have. They're genuinely interested to poke around our community and see what's going on. And they're getting out and they're doing that, and I think that's wonderful. So if you meet an intern, say hello, welcome them to Topeka, and then point them in the direction of whatever your favorite activity is so they can go check it out. Thank you.
Councilman Schwartz.
Thank you. What can we do after what happened in Orlando? Today's Flag Day, and as I drove around the city, I didn't see a whole lot of flags. So July 4th is coming up, so let's get our flags out and show how proud we are to be Americans. Happy Father's Day this weekend to a lot of men out there, including my husband. And my Gem of Topeka is also devoted to staff this week. City 4, Ronaldo and his whole staff have worked tirelessly to get us the budget meetings, all of our meetings digitized, and so that the whole city can watch. So thank you so much to all of them.
Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to wish fathers a happy Father's Day on Sunday. And I got the gym this week. And I encourage you guys, if you get a chance, to go visit the city health clinic. I had an issue I needed to talk to them about, and they got me right in, got me out, and it was so much better than going to the doctor's office. So I just encourage you, any city employees, to go try it, and you might like it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. First, regarding the Orlando tragedy, I want to give a thank you out to Chief Brown and our faith leaders in this community for coming together in the rally to support our LGBT community here and reassure them that every citizen in this town is valued and to the extent that they possibly can would be supported by the faith community and be safe. And I think that was a big step that meant a lot to me and to a lot of people. Kudos to Visit Topeka for the Food Truck Fest last weekend. They went from 10 food trucks that ran out to 34 that were very successful, and I know that will happen again. A reminder that the Sunflower Music Festival is going on this week every night and a couple of afternoons. Wonderful chamber orchestra and chamber ensemble music. The concerts are free. Great chance to go yourself as well as to take young people or friends or family and give them a chance to experience that wonderful music for the first time with internationally accomplished and famous musicians. It's like summer camp. They come every year and love to be in Topeka. They give us great music, and also speaking of interns, the Blanche Bryden Summer Institute, which is high school and college level, excellent musicians who get a chance to work with one another, as well as with a cadre out of that Sunflower Institute of those internationally accomplished teachers and musicians. In terms of dedications, we've got one this week, and that is the Freedom Park, Rotary Freedom Park at Constitution Hall, and its dedication will be this week, Thursday at 5:30 downtown, and that's been a tremendous effort as well. Last but not least, my gem, if you want to call it that, is that often when I've got guests in town, their family or they're friends of my kids and people that have already been here before or have a connection. This week, long weekend, I had the pleasure of hosting a childhood chum of mine who has never been here. Got a chance to show her. Brought her into the airport first through Kansas City and then out and through Topeka, through that Sunflower Music Festival, out all over Kansas, and took her to the airport back on Monday. And I just want to share with you all that she was blown away. She had no idea that Kansas and Topeka were like what she saw when she came. It looked good. So,
Very good.
thank you.
Very good. Councilwoman Claire.
There's 4-H events going on at the Expo Center this weekend, and I get a chance to help judge for the King and Queen. I'm very excited about that. June 20th, concert in the park, Garfield, and Happy Dad's Day.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz. That completes the announcements for this evening. We do have public comment. Joseph Bedbetter.
Governing body, my flag's out. Anyway, I knew it was Flag Day. I learned that as a kid. Don't you appreciate Doug's dry sense of humor? We're all going to meet tomorrow because I'm not coming down, but the rest of you have a good time. I wanted to also say another comment about Riverfront. Next time you decide to just maybe take a little spin outside the town, 50 miles away up K4 is Atchison. They have a very nice riverfront park. I doubt that Doug Kinsger ever went there, but there are little riverfront parks that have been well-built for not a lot of money, and I think they spent between $2 and $3 million on that park. It's well integrated into the downtown. It celebrates the Lewis and Clark expedition. That's when I first went down there. It was about 10 years ago. It was 2004, actually. There's a farmer's market next to it. Good ideas don't always cost a lot of money. They do if you're going to build a dam. They do if you don't involve the public. They do if you just have an insular group that talks about things, but you don't really get the broader picture. Noto didn't take a lot of money to get off the ground. Highland, our Avondale East didn't take a huge amount of money to get that turned around and turned into a net reach center. Yes, it took some money, but great ideas don't always cost millions and millions of dollars. And that's the point I'm trying to make. We talked about history. The Comery signage is a good idea. I don't want to see Mr. Evans taking off signs either, because he was a great astronaut. He came out of Highland Park High School. I don't know how many of you people knew that. Many years before I graduated from there, but he is quite a hero, and I think he needs to be celebrated. On economic development, I want to talk about, we've got elections coming up of county commissioners. Potentially we'll get new county commissioners, maybe we won't. We're going to get potentially a new sheriff, maybe we won't. We're going to get a new DA. These elections are coming up in August. I encourage people to pay attention and actually start learning about what's been going on with your economic development dollars. And I would encourage people running for those offices to be polite to the public when they come to the JADO meetings, not rude. Because I've had members of the Citizens for Accountability in Government complain repeatedly to me, and I said, why complain to me? Complain to the county commissioners that are doing it. About the rudeness, that when they present ideas or they have ideas, they're basically shut down. And it's not going to help this community move forward if the leadership doesn't know how to be a servant. It doesn't know how to have some humility. In fact, it goes a long ways when leaders do have that. And I'm not talking to any of you. Y'all do just great. But people have got to be aware of how they're perceived when they're talking to people at this podium or when they're addressing people. And I'm not just talking about me. I've got a lot thicker skin than a lot of people do. And I'm more than happy to give it back. But the point is, these are citizens. They have a right to speak. They pay the taxes. Treat them with respect. And you may just see this community actually grow phenomenally over the next few years if we'll just include people and let people talk and participate. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That concludes the public comment for this evening, and that concludes the business of our meeting. The next point is to have an executive session if the city attorney would provide the parameters.
The motion will be that the governing body recess into executive session for a period of 20 minutes to consult with the city's legal counsel regarding potential or pending litigation that requires privileged attorney-client communication. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present: elected officials, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Finance Director Brandon Kaufman, and myself.
It's been moved to go into executive session with those parameters, seconded by Councilman Jensen. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
Nine having voted yes. We're going to executive session when the room is clear. We take